Day 3, we are going to focus on grouping, and then once we have a firm knowledge of grouping factoring with 4 terms, we're going to use what's called the AC method, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. So if you have 4 terms, you're going to factor by grouping. The first step is going to be we're going to put the 4 terms into 2 groups with parentheses. You group the first 2 terms together. You group the last 2 terms. Leave the symbol that is, if it's a plus sign, leave it out in between them. If it's a minus sign, change it to a plus and negative, so it's adding the opposite like you would with integers and adding, subtracting positive and negative numbers. And then that way that symbol can stay with the next term. Then your next step is going to be to factor out the GCF from each group. If I look at this first group, I see that I can divide out a 2x squared. If I divide out a 2x squared out of the first one, I'm left with 4x cubed. Divide it out of the second one, I'm left with a negative 3. Now, here's what you want the goal to be. You want to factor something out so that what's left over in the parentheses is 4x cubed minus 3. Well, to turn 12 into 4, you have to divide out a 3, a positive 3. And to turn 9 into 3, it's a positive 3. We can't do any variable terms because only one of them has variables. Then, once you've factored that GCF out, what's left in parentheses is the same in both groups, like we had said we wanted it to be. So then we put our 2 terms together that are outside into one binomial and what's shared in the other. And what that means is this is alike in both our separate groupings. So therefore one of our binomials is 4x cubed minus 3. And then what's left over is our other binomial. So 2x squared plus 3. And we're done. Let's try another example. We look at this one. We've got y cubed minus 4y squared minus 2y plus 8. So since this is a minus, I'm going to make it plus a negative. And then I group. And I do that because we need to have that plus out in the middle. Because otherwise it starts looking like multiplication. When we do that, in the first term, I see that here I can factor out a y squared. And what's left is a y minus 4. I want y minus 4 to be left in the second one, so I have to factor out a minus 2. And so then what's left, what is in common, is y minus 4. And what's left over is y squared minus 2. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Now we get to what we call the AC method. This method is going to be used when the A value, right out here, is bigger than 1 and you cannot factor it out as a GCF. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to multiply our A and C terms together. 3 times 2 is 6. And then we're going to make a T-table that you want values, instead of multiplying to C adding to B, we want multiplies to AC and adds to B. Well, we've already determined that AC, which is what the method is named after, is 6. We want multiplies to 6, adds to negative 5. So if we're multiplying to a positive, adding to a negative, we know that both of our numbers need to be negative. So we've got negative 1 times negative 6 and negative 2 times negative 3. Negative 2 times negative 3 is what adds to negative 5. We're not done there. A lot of you want to jump right to, oh, there's my answer. But actually, that is going to split our B term. It splits it. And so what we really have now is 3y squared minus 2y minus 3y plus 2. Now, the question always comes up of, does it matter how you organize those two terms that you're splitting the middle term with. No, it will just change what you're factoring out, because the next step then is going to be to finish factoring using the grouping method that we just did on the last slide. So we've got here a plus, a negative, and here. So we look here and say, well, 3 and 2 don't have a common factor, but I can factor out a y, leaving me with 3y minus 2. Well, we've got negative 3y plus 2. In order to make those the opposite signs, we need to factor out a negative 1, which will leave the 3y minus 2 on the inside. Now, what we have in common is 3y minus 2. And what we have left over is y minus 1. Here is where it is so important to make sure that you check your work. Because if you don't check it, you're assuming that it's correct. And the beautiful part about factoring is you should always, always, always know if your answer is correct when you get to the end. So if we multiply this through, 3y times y is 3y squared. 3y times negative 1 is negative 3y. Negative 2 times y is negative 2y. Negative 2 times negative 1 is positive 2. And then we know that this combines to negative 5y. Because if you don't do this, you can go and do guess and check method, but I will tell you it's a lot more challenging. That was the way I did it when I was in school, and it was really frustrating trying to factor. But go back and check your work. It's a quick process, and you can make sure that you have correct answers before you turn in something for factoring. All right, next problem we got here. We got 2x squared plus 7x minus 15. 7 and 15 are odd, so we know we can't factor out the 2. We also know that because this is negative, we're going to have a plus minus for our answers. So we want to multiply out to negative 15, so we need multiplies to negative 30, adds to 7. So we go through and we know that because we need to add to a positive, the bigger number needs to be positive. So we got 30 times negative 1. We've got negative 2 times 15. We got negative 3 times 10. We've got negative 5 times 6. So when we go through, this is 29. This is 13, 7, 1. Here's what we need. So that means now we've got still our 2x squared, but now we've got plus 10x minus, or I'm going to put my plus a negative 3x minus 15. And I did that so that way we can group really quickly with having that plus sign in between. And then we go factoring out GCF. So 2x squared and 10x, I can factor out a 2x. That leaves me with x plus 5. We want an x plus 5 in the second one. Well, to get negative 3x into positive x, we need to factor out a negative 3. And negative 3 times 5 is negative 15. That means that we've got an x plus 5 as our one binomial. And we've got a 2x minus 3 as our second. If we check that, 2x times x is 2x squared. X times negative 3 is negative 3x. 5 times 2x is 10x. Negative 3x plus 10x is 7x. And 5 times negative 3 is negative 15. So we make sure that our answers check out. And let's try one more practice problem here. Here we get all excited because we see a negative 9 and a 9, but then we got 10, and that doesn't factor. So we now need to 10 times negative 9, so negative 90. So negative 90, if we need to add to a positive, the bigger number needs to be the positive number. So we've got negative 1 and 90. We've got negative 2 and 45. We've got negative 3 and 30. We've got negative 5, 18. We've got negative 6. I know it's divisible by negative 6 because we've got 2 and 3, and that is going to be 15. 7 doesn't work, 8 doesn't work. We've got -9 and +10. And so when we check, we got 89, we're way far off. We got 43, we got 27, we've got 13, we've got 9, and we got 1. So we know our numbers. So now we've got -9x squared plus 15x. We'll put a plus -6x plus 10. And we group. And I'm going to start by taking out a -3x. You don't have to take out negative, but it makes life easier for me, I think. So we take out a -3x, and we're left with 3x minus 5. We want the 3x minus 5 left here. That means I need to take out a -2. So now when we have what, 3x minus 5 in common, and -3x minus 2 as our other binomial. So now, I want you to try, we got a factoring by grouping, and we got a factoring, make sure I got it right here, factoring by grouping and a factoring by AC method. Write your summaries, bring your questions to the class.